After 4 days of hostilities that alarmed the world, India and Pakistan have agreed to a ceasefire, stopping all military action as of 5 p.m. India confirmed the ceasefire shortly after US President Donald Trump announced it on his Truth Social platform. India said that it was the Pakistan DGMO who initiated the call this afternoon, and after which discussions took place and an understanding was reached. Minutes after India announced a full and immediate ceasefire with Pakistan after days of missile, drone and artillery attacks, we heard Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar issue a stern message for harbors of terror. He said, and I quote him, "India has consistently maintained a firm and uncompromising stance against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. It will continue to do so." The ceasefire comes a day after Pakistan targeted Indian air bases. India chose its targets carefully. Those are the visuals coming in of Prime Minister Modi in that meeting with Raksha Mantri, National Security Advisor, other officers of the Indian Armed Forces. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is present as well. Foreign Secretary is present as well. This is the first meeting which is being chaired by the Prime Minister after the ceasefire announcement which has come in. Remember, India this morning launched a series of attacks against Pakistan air bases, and the objective was to cripple Pakistan's capability to launch aerial attacks using drones and fighter jets. And the attacks on these key Air Force bases had actually had the capacity certainly of crippling Pakistan's aerial mobility. And shortly after the breakthrough, India had warned that any act of terror will be considered an act of war. We will be staying on those visuals because Prime Minister Modi's meeting with the Defence Minister, with External Affairs Minister and others becomes very, very crucial at this juncture. What is the big message that will be carrying forward from this will become important again. Let's listen in now to the Foreign Secretary and the MOD briefing which happened earlier today.
Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan called the Director General of Military Operations of India at 15:35 hours earlier this afternoon. It was agreed between them that both sides would stop all firing and military action on land and in the air and sea with effect from 1700 hours Indian Standard Time today. Instructions have been given on both sides to give effect to this understanding. The Directors General of Military Operations will talk again on the 12th of May at 1200 hours. Thank you.
Several attempts were made by Pakistan on spreading a misinformation campaign, as we have seen for the last few days. There were attempts made to say that our S-400 at a northern base was destroyed, which was completely false, and that it was destroyed by a JF-17, it was a false information. Also, that the BrahMos installation was attacked and it was destroyed was false. The destruction of airfields at Srinagar, Jammu, Pathankot, Bhuj, Nalia, etc. was also a false claim. The forward ammunition dump at Chandigarh and Beas are also fit and fine, and we showed you these in the photographs in the morning briefing today. Also, there was a certain different way of miscampaign that Pakistan conducted by its press conferences, which was conducted in a manner which was completely misleading and devoid of facts. Pakistan has been spreading fabricated allegations that the Indian Armed Forces have targeted mosques. Let us make this very clear here, that India is a secular nation and the Indian Armed Forces are a reflection of our constitutional values. We hold every place of worship of all faiths in the highest regard. Our operations have been aimed exclusively at terrorist camps and facilities being used for anti-India activities. No religious sites, I repeat, no religious sites have been targeted by the Indian Armed Forces. Over the past few days, as we have seen, Pakistan all has suffered very heavy and unsustainable losses after it has given us an unprovoked attack on our installations. It has suffered losses in both land and air. There has been an extensive damage to the crucial Pakistani air bases like Skardu, Sargodha, Jacobabad, and Bholari. In addition, a loss of AD weapon system and radars made the defense of Pakistani airspace untenable. Across the line of control, extensive and precise damage to military infrastructure and command control centers and logistic installations. In addition to that, 2 military personnel had led to complete breakdown of its defensive and offensive capability and also Pakistani morale.
And joining me now is Shivarur, straight from Srinagar. We also have Aishwarya Jain tracking Prime Minister's meeting very closely. Shiv, I'm coming to you first, because government sources are saying clearly that this is a conditional ceasefire only on kinetic action, and Pakistan still has water, trade, diplomatic and financial sanctions. So clearly, as far as the messaging which is going from the government of India is that if there is any kind of violation now onwards, it will be seen as an act of war.
Absolutely correct, Maria. I think India is signaling very unconditionally that this ceasefire has been on its terms. It's because Pakistan requested the ceasefire. The Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan, a full 9 hours after some of the highest kinetic actions that India has taken against Pakistani military bases, 11 of them in all across the country, is when the DGMO of Pakistan decided to pick up the phone, dial India and ask for that ceasefire. A cumulative effect of kinetic actions plus all of those diplomatic measures that you mentioned, as well as the Indus Waters Treaty, had clearly worn Pakistan down. Now, this may not be a time, for any kind of national gloating, as it were, but never should we ever lose sight of the fact that all of this began with a terrorist attack in which 26 innocents were butchered by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists. And keeping that in view, the fact that India has, wrangled a ceasefire after Pakistan came to it, obviously under great pressure of these military strikes on its most strategic assets in different parts of the country, has meant that India has agreed to a ceasefire from a position of strength. Very importantly, that you pointed out that the Indus Waters Treaty, perhaps the most unsung of Indian actions against Pakistan, has had a very, very deep effect on the Pakistani psyche, politically, diplomatically, and even culturally, given that, it had never been imagined that water would be cut off. But I think the prospect of, a terrible energy crisis, a food crisis, a farming crisis in that country meant that Pakistan was already on the back foot before these kinetic actions actually began. And the drone strikes were actually something they needed to sell to their domestic audience in order to look strong. So net, I believe that India has, negotiated this ceasefire from a position of power, from a position of advantage, and has very tellingly pointed out that only kinetic and military actions are stopping right now. All of the other decisions continue to remain active.
All right, let me bring in Aishwarya. Aishwarya, the message that has come in from Prime Minister Modi's new doctrine, it is India's modern security doctrine, which has been firmly put on for the world to see, that it is swift, surgical and unapologetically assertive. India can protect its citizens, and if there is an act of terrorism which emanates from its neighborhood, then they should be prepared for retaliation of this nature.
Well, India remains watchful. While the ceasefire offers temporary relief from rising tensions, the Indian military's statement underscores that peace will be maintained only if Pakistan refrains from provocation, and India will remain watchful, asserting that future threats will be met with forceful and immediate retaliation. Remember what Colonel Qureshi also stated during that press conference that India will not tolerate misinformation, false propaganda, or any aggression. Forces will remain strong, alert, and fully prepared. And therefore, the reason perhaps those visuals on our screens where Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairing that high-level meeting, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, NSA Ajit Doval, along with all the service chiefs being given a strong message from the Prime Minister that our forces should remain on strong alert and they should be fully prepared because there has been, of course, a mistrust with Pakistan. We all know that what is the history with the Pakistan, and therefore the reason perhaps on one side there is temporary relief, ceasefire, but Indian armed forces and Indian dispensation will be always on alert, and there will be no, such case that will be dealt. Of course, the message was loud and clear in the earlier meeting as well that if any sort of future terrorism activity will be done from the Pakistani side, from their terror hubs, then it will be considered as an act of war. India will respond accordingly.